The transport ship descended through clouds of crimson dust that swirled around the towers of Veylathi Prime like living spirits. Commander Silas Kane stood at the observation window, watching the alien capital grow larger with each passing moment. His reflection in the glass showed a man hardened by war, with eyes that had seen too much death and hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion. 3 months of fighting in the Outer Rim had left him changed, marked by violence in ways that went far deeper than the flesh. The landing sequence engaged with a metallic groan, and Silas gripped the railing to steady himself. Pain radiated through his left shoulder, where plasma fire had burned through his armor 2 weeks ago. The medical team had done what they could, but field medicine could only accomplish so much when resources ran thin and enemies pressed from all sides. He wore his dress uniform now, crisp and clean, but beneath the fabric lay a roadmap of suffering that told the true story of humanity's struggle for survival among the stars. Diplomatic protocols required his presence at the Imperial Palace. The treaty negotiations had reached a critical phase, and both sides needed assurances that the fragile peace would hold. Silas had been chosen not for his diplomatic skills, which were minimal at best, but because he embodied something the aliens respected, a warrior who fought with honor and survived against impossible odds. The scars he carried were his credentials, proof that humanity could endure. The palace gates opened as his escort vehicle approached, massive doors of crystalline metal that reflected the dual suns hanging low on the horizon. Guards lined the pathway, their armor gleaming with an otherworldly sheen that human technology had yet to replicate. They were Veylathi warriors, tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered in shades of deep purple and blue. Each one could likely kill him with their bare hands. Yet they bowed their heads as he passed, acknowledging his rank and reputation. Inside the throne room, the air felt different, cooler, heavier. The walls rose higher than any cathedral Silas had ever seen on Earth, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Golden veins ran through the rock, like rivers of fire frozen in time. At the far end, elevated on a platform that made her seem almost divine, sat Empress Veylana. Silas had seen images of her before. Every human soldier had studied the faces of alien leaders, memorizing features and expressions that might mean the difference between life and death in negotiations. But no image could capture the reality of her presence. She radiated authority in a way that made the air itself seem to bend around her. Her eyes glowed with an inner light, amber pools that held centuries of wisdom and power. She wore robes that flowed like liquid silver, and a crown of twisted metal that resembled thorns more than jewels. He approached slowly, each step measured and deliberate. Protocol demanded he stop 10 paces from the throne, but Veylana raised one slender hand in a gesture that meant continue. Silas advanced until he stood at the base of her platform, close enough to see the intricate patterns tattooed along her neck and collarbone, marks that denoted battles won and enemies vanquished. The moment stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Then Veylana spoke, her voice a melody that human vocal cords could never replicate. The translation device in his ear rendered her words, "Commander Kane, your reputation precedes you. They say you cannot be killed." Silas allowed himself a bitter smile. "I assure you, your majesty, I am very mortal. I simply refuse to die before my mission is complete. And what mission is that? Peace between our peoples, between our worlds." Veylana tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel transparent. "Noble words, but words are wind. What proof do you offer humanity's sincerity?" Silas had prepared for this question. He had rehearsed answers with the diplomatic corps, crafted responses that balanced strength with humility. But standing before her now, with those ancient eyes piercing through his defenses, all the careful words evaporated. Instead, he reached up and began unfastening his uniform jacket. The guards tensed immediately, hands moving toward weapons. But Veylana raised her hand again and they froze. She leaned forward slightly, curiosity replacing caution in her expression. Silas shrugged off the jacket, letting it fall to the polished floor. His undershirt followed. Cool air touched his exposed skin, and he heard the sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the vast room. His torso was a canvas of violence. Burns from plasma weapons created patterns of twisted flesh across his ribs. Deep gouges where blades had found a mark ran along his shoulders and arms. The puncture wounds from projectile weapons dotted his abdomen like constellations. Each scar had a story, a moment when death had reached for him and found him just out of reach. But the worst damage was harder to see. Exhaustion had carved lines into his face that made him look older than his 32 years. His hand shook slightly from nerve damage. When he breathed deeply, a clicking sound came from his chest where broken ribs had healed imperfectly. Veylana rose from her throne for the first time since he had entered. She descended the steps slowly, her robes trailing behind her like smoke. The room fell absolutely silent. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath as their empress approached the human warrior standing half-naked before her throne. She stopped just inches away, close enough that Silas could smell something like cinnamon and starlight on her skin. Her fingers reached out, hovering over a particularly vicious scar that ran from his collarbone to his navel. She did not touch him, but her hand trembled slightly. "This one," she whispered, her voice barely audible even with the translator. "This should have killed you." "It tried," Silas replied. "I was protecting a group of Veylathi civilians caught in the crossfire during the Battle of Crimson Station. A raider's blade found me, but I made sure they reached the evacuation ships first." Veylana's eyes snapped up to meet his. Something flickered in their depths, an emotion he could not name but felt in his bones. Her gaze traveled across every mark, every wound, and Silas saw her expression shift from curiosity to something deeper, something that made his heart beat faster despite the pain. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried to the throne room like thunder. "You bear the marks of a warrior, but these scars tell me something more. They speak of sacrifice, of choices made not for glory, but for others." She turned to face her court, her voice rising. "This human has bled for my people. He has placed Veylathi lives above his own survival. What greater proof of sincerity could we demand?" She turned back to Silas, and for just a moment, the Empress disappeared and he saw something else. A woman, a being who understood pain and sacrifice in ways that transcended species. Her hand finally made contact, fingertips brushing lightly over the scar on his chest. The touch sent electricity through his entire body. "You fascinate me, Commander Kane," she said softly, meant only for his ears. "And that is dangerous for us both." The healing chambers of the Imperial Palace existed in a wing that few outsiders ever saw. Veylana had insisted on taking Silas there herself, dismissing the protests of her advisors with a wave that brooked no argument. Now he lay on a platform that hummed with energy, while devices he could not name worked to repair damage that human medicine had deemed permanent. The Empress stood nearby, her robes replaced with simpler garments that somehow made her seem more approachable, yet no less magnificent. She watched the healing process with intense focus, occasionally adjusting controls on panels that displayed information in her native language. Silas could feel the warmth spreading through his body as alien technology knitted torn muscles and smoothed scarred tissue. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Veylana glanced at him, those amber eyes catching the light. "Because I can. Because you deserve better than to carry such pain." She paused, her fingers hovering over the controls. "And perhaps because I see something in you that I thought existed only in our oldest legends." "What do you see?" "A warrior who fights not from hatred, but from love. Every scar on your body was earned protecting someone else. My intelligence reports are thorough, Commander. I know your history. The colony ship you saved on Europa, the settlement on Titan, where you held the line for 6 days with only 12 soldiers, the children you carried through fire on Ganymede while bombs fell around you." Silas felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the healing technology. "I was just doing my duty." "No." Veylana moved closer, standing at the edge of the platform so she could look directly down at him. "Duty is following orders. What you did was choose, again and again, to sacrifice yourself so others could live. That is not duty. That is something far more rare and precious." The healing chamber chimed softly, indicating the session was complete. Silas sat up slowly, marveling at the absence of pain that had been his constant companion for months. He rolled his shoulders experimentally, feeling muscles move freely for the first time in so long he had forgotten what it felt like. "Thank you," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Veylana smiled, and the expression transformed her face from regal to radiant. "Come, walk with me. There is much I wish to show you, and more I wish to understand about your kind." They walked through gardens that defied Earth's understanding of botany. Plants grew in spirals and geometric patterns, their leaves shimmering with bioluminescence as the sun set beyond the palace walls. Water flowed upward in some fountains, defying gravity through technology Silas could not comprehend. The air smelled of flowers that had no names in human languages, sweet and spicy and utterly alien. "Tell me about Earth," Veylana said as they walked along a path of stones that changed color beneath their feet. "Not the statistics or the treaties. Tell me what it feels like to be human." Silas considered the question carefully. "It feels like being small in a universe that is vast, like knowing you will only live for a brief moment compared to the age of stars, and trying to make that moment mean something. We fight because we are afraid, but we also fight because we love what we have built together. Every human carries both darkness and light inside them, and we spend our whole lives trying to figure out which one to feed." "You speak like a philosopher and not a soldier. My mother was a teacher before the wars came. She used to say that the strongest weapon was not a gun or a bomb, but an idea that could change hearts." Silas smiled at the memory. "She died defending her school when raiders attacked our colony. She bought time for her students to escape. I was 15. Veylana stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "I am sorry. Loss is a burden that crosses all species. Did you lose someone too?" The Empress looked away, her gaze distant. "I have lost many. My parents when I was young, killed in a coup that I survived only through luck. My sister, who died in the plague that swept our world a century ago. My mate, who fell in battle defending our borders from the Krent invasion." Her voice carried centuries of grief, compressed into a few simple words. Without thinking, Silas reached out and took her hand. It was an audacious gesture, one that could be interpreted as an insult to her position. But Veylana did not pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, and they stood together in the alien garden as two souls who understood the weight of survival. "How do you bear it?" Silas asked quietly. "All that loss, and you still lead with strength. Because giving up would mean their deaths were meaningless. Because my people need me to be strong even when I feel broken inside. Because hope is not something you find, Commander. It is something you create through sheer force of will, day after day, choice after choice." They walked further into the gardens, still holding hands, and talked for hours. Veylana spoke of her empire's history, of wars that had raged for generations, and peace that had been hard-won through sacrifice. Silas shared stories of humanity's journey to the stars, the struggles and triumphs that had defined their species. They discovered common ground in unexpected places, laughing at similarities between their peoples, and marveling at differences that made each culture unique. As the night deepened and the stars emerged in unfamiliar constellations, they found themselves in a secluded grove where a single tree grew. Its trunk was massive, easily 30 feet in diameter. Its branches spread out like arms embracing the sky. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed along every branch, casting a soft blue light that made the space feel sacred. "This is the heart tree," Veylana explained, her voice reverent. "It has stood here for 3,000 years. Our tradition says that those who speak truth beneath its branches are bound by fate itself. That is a heavy burden to carry. Perhaps, but some burdens become lighter when shared." She turned to face him, and in the gentle light, she looked vulnerable in a way that her throne room presence never allowed. "I must confess something, Silas Kane. From the moment you removed your armor and showed me your scars, I've been unable to stop thinking about you. This is unprecedented for me. Dangerous, even. An empress cannot afford such distractions." Silas felt his heart racing. "I have thought of little else but you since our meeting. Your strength, your wisdom, the way you carry the weight of worlds on your shoulders and still find room for compassion. But you are right. This is dangerous." Our peoples have only just begun to trust each other. A relationship between us could destroy everything we have worked for. It could, Veylana agreed, or it could become the foundation of something stronger than any treaty. A bridge between our worlds built not on politics, but on genuine connection. She stepped closer, and Silas could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The height difference meant he had to look up slightly to meet her eyes, but in that moment, he felt no inequality. They were simply two beings drawn together by forces neither could fully understand. "What do you want, Veylana?" he asked, using her name without title for the first time. "I want to know what it feels like to choose something for myself rather than for my empire. I want to explore this connection between us without fear of consequences. I want—" She hesitated, vulnerability flickering across her face. "I want to feel alive again, not just as an empress, but as a woman." Silas raised his hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently touched her face. Her skin felt warm and impossibly soft, with a texture like silk woven with starlight. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "Then let us be reckless together," he whispered. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow we can return to being the commander and the empress. But here, now, beneath this ancient tree, let us simply be two souls who found each other across the vastness of space." Veylana smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Silas had ever seen. She leaned down, closing the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like the collision of two worlds. Gentle at first, then deeper, more passionate. Her arms wrapped around him, and he pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat synchronize with his own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Veylana rested her forehead against his. "This changes everything," she murmured. "I know. We may face opposition from both our peoples. I know that too. And still you would risk it?" Silas pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "For you, I would risk everything." The dawn arrived too quickly, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold that had no equivalent on Earth. Silas woke to find himself still in the garden, wrapped in robes that Veylana had summoned during the night. She lay beside him, her head resting on his chest, her breathing slow and peaceful. In sleep, she looked younger, the weight of empire temporarily lifted from her shoulders. He did not want to wake her, but duty called to them both. The peace summit was scheduled to resume in mere hours, and their absence would be noted. Already he could imagine the whispers, the scandals, the political maneuvering that would follow if their relationship became public knowledge. Veylana stirred, her eyes opening to meet his gaze. For a moment, neither spoke, both savoring the quiet intimacy of the morning. Then reality reasserted itself, and she sat up, running her fingers through hair that had come loose from an elaborate styling. "We must return before we are missed," she said, her voice carrying a note of regret. "I know, but I need to ask you something first." Silas sat beside her, taking her hand. "What happens now? Do we pretend last night never occurred? Do we hide what we feel to protect the peace negotiations?" Veylana was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "I have ruled for over 2 centuries, Silas. In that time, I made countless difficult decisions, sacrificed personal desires for the good of my people, and never once allowed my heart to override my responsibilities. But something shifted last night. You made me remember what it feels like to be more than just an empress. That does not answer my question." She smiled, sad but determined. "No, it does not, because I do not yet know the answer. What I feel for you is real and powerful, but the consequences of acting on these feelings could be catastrophic. My council already views humanity with suspicion. If they learn their empress had taken a human lover, it could shatter the fragile trust we have built." "Then we end this now," Silas said, though the words tasted like poison, "before it goes any further, before we risk everything both our peoples have worked for. Is that what you truly want?" "No, but I am a soldier. I understand sacrifice. If my personal happiness must be the price of peace, then so be it." Veylana stood, her robes flowing around her like liquid metal. She walked to the edge of the grove, looking out at the palace that awaited her return. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of command. I am tired of sacrifice, tired of being told what I can and cannot do, what I must be for others. Perhaps it is selfish, but I want this. I want you, and I am willing to fight for that, even if it means challenging every tradition and expectation placed upon me." Silas rose and joined her, standing at her side. "The opposition will be fierce, from both our peoples. Let them oppose. I did not become empress by backing down from challenges." She turned to him, fire burning in her amber eyes. "But I will not force this path upon you. You must choose freely, knowing the trials that await us." "I chose you the moment I showed you my scars," Silas replied. "Everything since then has just been confirmation of what my heart already knew." They returned to the palace separately, maintaining the fiction of propriety. But word had already begun to spread. Servants had seen them enter the garden together. Guards had noted their absence. By midday, when the peace summit reconvened, the whispers had become a roar. The human delegation met in private chambers before the session began. Ambassador Torres, a severe woman with sharp eyes and sharper political instincts, wasted no time addressing the situation. "Commander Kane, I need you to tell me that the rumors are false, that you did not spend the night with Empress Veylana." Silas stood at attention, his military training allowing him to maintain a neutral expression. "I cannot tell you that, Ambassador." The room erupted in protests and exclamations. Torres raised her hand for silence, her face flushed with anger. "Do you have any idea what you have done? We are here to negotiate a treaty that could prevent war between our species. Your personal indiscretions could destroy months of careful diplomacy. With respect, Ambassador, my relationship with the Empress is not an indiscretion. It is genuine and mutual, and I believe it could actually strengthen the bonds between our peoples rather than weaken them." "You believe? You are willing to gamble the future of humanity on what you believe?" Torres shook her head in disbelief. "You are relieved of duty, Commander, effective immediately. You will remain in quarters until we can arrange transport back to Earth." Silas felt the words like a physical blow, but he held his ground. "I understand your position, Ambassador, but I will not apologize for what I feel or for what has grown between the Empress and myself." The Veylathi Council was equally displeased. Silas learned later that they had demanded Veylana end the relationship immediately, calling it a disgrace to her position and a betrayal of her late mate's memory. But Veylana had refused, standing before her council with the same iron will that had made her empress. The summit that afternoon was tense, with both sides barely maintaining civility. But then something unexpected happened. A message arrived from the outer colonies, a distress signal from a joint human and Veylathi settlement under attack by raiders. The message was desperate, reporting heavy casualties and requesting immediate assistance. Veylana stood before the assembly, her voice clear and commanding. "This settlement represents everything we hope to achieve through peace. Humans and Veylathi living together, working together, building a future together. If we abandon them now, we abandon our ideals. I propose a joint military response." Ambassador Torres hesitated, clearly torn between political considerations and moral imperatives. Then, from the back of the human delegation, Silas spoke. "I volunteer to lead the human contingent." Torres turned, surprised to find him there despite her orders. "You are relieved of command, remember? Then I volunteer as a civilian. Those people need help, and I have experience in exactly this type of operation." Veylana met his eyes across the chamber, and something unspoken passed between them. "I will lead the Veylathi forces personally. Commander Kane's expertise will be invaluable. I request that he be temporarily reinstated for this mission." The vote was close, but ultimately both councils agreed. Within hours, ships were launching toward the embattled settlement, carrying the first truly integrated human and Veylathi military force in history. The battle was brutal. Raiders had surrounded the settlement, cutting off escape routes and bombarding defensive positions. Silas and Veylana coordinated their forces with a precision that surprised even their own troops. They fought side by side, their earlier connection translating seamlessly into tactical synchronicity. When a raider ship broke through their lines and targeted the settlement hospital, Silas did not hesitate. He piloted his fighter directly into its path, absorbing fire meant for the medical facility. His ship took critical damage, and he crash-landed in the settlement's central square. Veylana reached him first, tearing through debris with strength born of desperation. She pulled him from the wreckage, his body broken but alive. As medics worked frantically to stabilize him, she held his hand, whispering words in her native tongue that transcended translation. The settlement was saved. The raiders were driven off. And in the aftermath, as both peoples tended their wounded and mourned their dead, something profound shifted. Soldiers who fought together now shared meals and stories. Medics worked on patients regardless of species. The barriers that politics had maintained began to crumble under the weight of shared sacrifice. Weeks later, after Silas had recovered enough to stand without assistance, Veylana made a public address to both their peoples. She spoke of unity forged in fire, of love that crossed the boundaries of species, and of a future where humans and Veylathi were not merely allies but family. I stand before you not just as your empress, but as a woman who has found something precious and rare. Commander Silas Kane has shown me that courage comes in many forms. That love can bridge divides thought impossible to cross. I formally announce my intention to bind myself to him in union, and I ask both our peoples to accept this as a symbol of the peace we all seek. The reaction was mixed, but no one could deny the change that had swept through both cultures. The joint operation had proven what cooperation could achieve, and the image of their empress, powerful and eternal, choosing a mortal human as her partner, captured imaginations across the galaxy. The bonding ceremony took place beneath the heart tree, where they had first confessed their feelings. Representatives from both species attended, and the event was broadcast across countless worlds. As Veylana and Silas exchanged vows in both their languages, promising to stand together against whatever challenges the universe might present, something shifted in the collective consciousness of two civilizations. They were no longer simply allies bound by treaties written on paper. They were connected through something deeper, something that spoke the fundamental truth that love, compassion, and sacrifice were universal languages that transcended biology and culture. In the years that followed, historians would point to this moment as the true beginning of the golden age of unity. But for Silas and Veylana, standing together beneath ancient branches as two civilizations watched, the future mattered less than the present. They had found each other across the vast darkness of space. Two wounded souls who had learned that the strongest bonds are forged not in perfection, but in shared scars and mutual understanding. And as they kissed, sealing their union before witnesses both human and alien, the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself approved of hearts that dare to love across galaxies.